A professor tried to humiliate her in front of everyone, but when she picked up the chalk, the entire room fell silent. What happened next turned a forgotten girl into a national icon of brilliance. This is the story of Maya Thompson. Monday morning, Halton University, Massachusetts. Light rain tapped against the concrete as Maya Thompson stepped into the grand mathematics lecture hall. Her backpack tugged at her shoulders, heavy with notes, but not as heavy as the weight she carried in her chest. High ceilings loomed above like a cathedral of expectations, and the massive blackboard stretched across the front like a battlefield already marked by hundreds of fallen students. No one noticed Maya. A few glanced her way and quickly whispered to their neighbors. She didn't need to hear the words. The tone said enough: the skepticism, the dismissal, the quiet mockery. It was the same look she had seen in 1,000 different places. The one that asked, "Do you really belong here?" She sat down near the middle row, opened her worn notebook, and silently prepared. She didn't come to be liked. She didn't come to fit in. She came to make them look twice. And today that was exactly what she intended to do. The sharp click of leather shoes echoed through the tiled floor. No one needed to look to know who had just entered: Professor Colin Mercer, a towering figure in the world of mathematics. His reputation preceded him: brilliant, merciless, unyielding. His voice rarely rose, yet his presence could shrink a room to silence. "I don't train the weak," he once told a room full of freshmen. "I eliminate them." Today he strode to the front, placed a worn leather notebook on the podium, and swept his gaze across the room like a scanner. No expression, no warmth, only calculation. When his eyes landed on Maya, he paused, not for long, but long enough to make a statement. His lip curled ever so slightly. "Maya Thompson," he said, drawing her name out as if it were a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. "Why don't you come up and solve this for us?" A faint chuckle rippled from the back. Maya didn't flinch. She knew this wasn't an invitation. It was a test. No, it was a warning shot. And she stepped forward anyway. Maya rose. Not hurried, not hesitant. Her every step toward the blackboard was measured like a soldier walking into battle. In her hand, the piece of chalk felt cool, smooth, but sharp, like a blade waiting to draw first blood. Behind her, whispers hissed like wind through broken glass. "She's actually going. Can't wait to see this crash and burn." She heard it all, and she silenced it by not responding. On the board, a multivariable calculus problem designed to intimidate. One glance told her that much: it was no accident. Professor Mercer had chosen something difficult enough to expose anyone who dared try. Maya studied it for a moment. Then she made her first mark. No tremble, no pause, just clean, confident lines. Some students stopped taking notes. Others sat up straighter, unsure whether to laugh or to watch. Professor Mercer stood with arms crossed. His stare had shifted, not dismissive but assessing, waiting for her to stumble. She didn't. Maya paused at the final line, drew a precise box around her answer, and placed the chalk gently on the ledge beneath the board. Not a word, not a sound. It was the kind of stillness that happens right before a storm or right after a truth lands like thunder. Dozens of eyes locked on the board, then on her, then back again, trying to catch a flaw that wasn't there. Professor Mercer stepped forward slowly. He didn't speak. He ran a finger across each step of her work, his eyes sharp, surgical. The silence grew heavier. Finally he spoke. An unconventional approach, he admitted, each word reluctantly carved from granite. But correct. A soft wave of shock passed through the room. Then from the back, "That wasn't just correct," a voice called out, clear, confident. "Dr. Alana Rivera, that was brilliant." Heads turned. Students sat up straighter. Professor Mercer's jaw tightened. This moment was no longer under his control. Maya turned slightly. She met the eyes of Dr. Rivera, the only professor in the room whose gaze didn't carry doubt, only quiet acknowledgement. Professor Mercer didn't respond right away, but his fingers tapped the podium. He wasn't done. He stepped toward the board, pointing to a skipped transformation. "You bypassed the standard method here," he said. Why, the question wasn't curiosity. It was challenge. It was, "Who gave you permission?" Maya didn't blink. "Because that step is redundant. I streamlined the process to remove unnecessary calculations and reach the answer faster." A few students exchanged glances. One murmured, "Wait, that actually makes sense." Dr. Rivera nodded with a faint smile. "Exactly. She didn't just solve the problem, she optimized it." Mercer stood stiffly, eyes fixed on the board. He couldn't argue. Not with Rivera validating every word. Not with 30 students watching. He adjusted his tie, cleared his throat. Well, he said, let's see how you perform on the next exam. But Maya knew. That wasn't dismissal. That was retreat. As the lecture ended, students packed up in silence. But the atmosphere wasn't the same anymore. Something had shifted, not just in tone, but in perception. Those who once laughed quietly now exchanged glances of intrigue. One guy who had smirked when Maya entered that morning stopped her at the door. That was impressive, he said. Maya didn't pause. I know. His eyebrows lifted slightly, then he chuckled, more surprised than offended. But Maya wasn't looking for validation from those who once dismissed her. She walked past without breaking stride. Behind her, Professor Mercer still stood at the podium, hand resting on his leather notebook. His stare was sharp, unreadable. But there was something else now, a flicker of caution. Just as Maya reached for the door, his voice cut through the silence. Miss Thompson, she turned halfway, didn't speak. I hope you understand what you've just started. Maya met his gaze with unnerving calm. I understand it better than you think. Doug Rivera watched from the back, arms crossed, lips barely curved. She wasn't surprised. She was waiting to see if Maya would just survive this war or change the entire battlefield. The next morning, the lecture hall felt the same, cold, rigid, oppressive, but Maya, she carried something different now, a stillness, a weight, a quiet authority no one had granted her, but she had claimed anyway. She took her usual seat. A few students glanced at her, not with mockery, but with curiosity, like they were trying to understand what had changed, when in truth everything had. Then came the click of Mercer's shoes. He entered, expression unreadable, and began class without ceremony. But the equation he scribbled across the board said everything. It was a beast, an advanced integral woven through partial derivatives and limit tests. It wasn't today's curriculum. It was a gauntlet. He didn't call Maya's name. He didn't need to. Everyone in the room knew who that challenge was for. Maya stood. Her movements weren't rushed. She didn't glance around for support. She didn't need permission. She walked toward the board with the kind of certainty that unsettles those who've built walls, because she wasn't knocking. She was walking straight through them. Maya stood before the towering blackboard, her silhouette cast long against the polished floor. The classroom, once filled with tension, now felt like a theater holding its breath. She examined the problem. There were two ways to approach it. One was safe, methodical, conventional, slow. The other was riskier, more elegant, but easier to derail. Most would never attempt it under pressure. But Maya saw the pattern instantly. Behind her, pens hovered midair. A few students leaned forward. Professor Mercer remained at his desk, arms crossed, eyes narrowed, not in doubt but in calculation. Was she bold enough to gamble her credibility again? She didn't hesitate. Her chalk moved swift and steady, bypassing the standard route. Every line she drew sliced through the noise like a violin through a storm. She wasn't just solving, she was composing. Whispers rose. Wait, is she? She's going that route. Even those who once rolled their eyes now sat straighter. Notebooks forgotten. Maya paused briefly midway, not because she doubted, but because she knew every decision she made here would echo beyond this board. And yet her hand didn't shake, because she had nothing to lose and everything to prove. She boxed the final answer, not a flourish, not a performance, just precision. When she turned to face the room, silence pressed in. Students who once looked past her now looked directly at her, not out of politeness, but respect. Professor Mercer stood. He approached the board slowly, not to correct her, but to understand her. He traced her steps with a frown that slowly faded. There was nothing to refute. Then something unexpected happened. A student in the back raised his hand, the same one who'd once laughed when she walked in. Professor, can Maya explain how she found that shortcut? I didn't even think to go that way. Heads turned. Dr. Rivera smiled faintly. That's an excellent question. Maya, she stepped forward, chalk in hand, and rewrote the diagram with graceful efficiency. No ego, no theatrics, just clarity. As she explained her method, simple, clean, brilliant, something rippled through the room. For the first time, Maya's name wasn't just a name. It was a turning point. After class, the students didn't scatter. They stayed, some forming a quiet crowd around Maya, not out of obligation, not to gawk, to listen. One girl whispered, I judged you before. I was wrong. Maya offered a small smile. No grudge, no gloating. She wasn't here for apologies. She was here to make change inevitable. Professor Mercer lingered by the door, arms folded, unreadable. As the students slowly filed out, he watched Maya. Not like before, not with disdain, with restraint. And maybe something closer to respect. De Rivera approached Maya with quiet steps, a hand resting lightly on her shoulder. Do you realize what just happened today? Maya nodded softly. I think I broke something. Rivera smiled. You didn't break it. You opened it. And now others can walk through. That night, Maya sat alone in the library, surrounded by silence and equations. But something was different now. For the first time, that silence didn't feel like a wall. It felt like space waiting to be filled with voices that had long been kept out. The next morning, Maya was reviewing notes in the campus library when the familiar echo of leather shoes approached. She didn't need to look up. Professor Mercer, he stopped beside her table, eyes sharp but unreadable. Maya, he began, I want you to know, I don't underestimate you. She looked up calm and steady. Not underestimating me doesn't mean you respect me. For a split second, his lips tightened. Then came the curve of a smile, polite, strategic. I'm considering nominating you for the Federal Academic Evaluation Program. It's a rare opportunity. She stared at him, searching his tone for truth. I appreciate it, she said flatly, but I've never needed anyone to open doors for me. That landed. His eyes narrowed ever so slightly. The smile disappeared. In that quiet space between their words, Maya saw it, the calculation. He wasn't offering her opportunity. He was laying a trap, and she had just stepped over it without flinching. That night, behind a locked door in the faculty wing, Mercer met with two other professors. One of them, Dr. Everett Langston, a veteran advisor and voting member of the National Academic Committee. She's gaining too much attention, Langston said, tapping his fingers on the table, and Rivera is feeding it. Mercer folded his arms. If we let this continue, our entire evaluation structure will be questioned. We need to remove her from the spotlight, another added. Mercer didn't blink. No, we don't remove her. We push her into a challenge she can't win. Langston leaned in. The National Strategy Mathematics exam. Graduate-level questions. One mistake under pressure, and she's done. Mercer nodded. I'll send the recommendation by morning. They didn't speak of her talent. They only spoke of her threat. None of them imagined that the threat wasn't her skill. It was her refusal to break. The next day, Maya received an email from the Academic Affairs Office, an official nomination to the National Strategic Mathematics Challenge hosted at Columbia University. She read the words twice. It was prestigious, only a handful of undergraduates had ever been chosen. But something felt off. Too sudden. Too perfect. She walked straight to Dr. Rivera's office. Rivera, sipping tea, raised an eyebrow as Maya stepped in. You've seen it? She asked. Maya nodded. You knew, Rivera sighed. Mercer submitted your name. There was a pause. Maya looked at the invitation again. They want me to fail. Rivera met her eyes. Maybe, but I've also seen what you can do. Maya set down the paper, still in her hand. I'm not scared of failing, she said. I'm scared they'll keep calling it a win when people like me are forced to lose by design. Rivera leaned forward, then proved the design wrong. And in that moment, Maya didn't just accept the challenge. She claimed it as hers to rewrite. A week later, Maya stepped into the massive examination hall at Columbia University. The room buzzed with quiet tension, the kind that settles in when brilliance is expected. But fear is closer. Candidates from MIT, Stanford, Caltech, all seated, all poised, all staring. When Maya entered, some turned, some whispered, "A girl in a hoodie here." She didn't flinch. Inside, the proctor passed out the exam, 4 questions, each more brutal than the last. Questions designed to stretch, to overwhelm, to break. No calculators, no aids. Only your mind, the proctor announced. Maya looked down at the first problem, a nonlinear 4th-degree system embedded in a rotating coordinate space. This wasn't a test. It was a minefield. But Maya didn't hesitate. She adjusted her grip on her pen and began to write. Because out there, people might still doubt her. But here on paper, numbers didn't lie. And she had spent her whole life becoming fluent in a language that didn't care about skin color or background, only truth. The room thickened with pressure. Pens scratched, erasers squeaked. Some students whispered curses under their breath. One MIT candidate muttered, This isn't even undergrad level. And still Maya wrote, fluidly, boldly. Every symbol she drew was precise. Every equation unraveled like silk. The judges began to whisper, "Who is that girl in seat 27? She's finishing faster than anyone. She's not pausing, not even once." Maya didn't hear any of it. She was inside the problem, her mind to map her focus like breath. She didn't write for speed. She wrote to be undeniable. In the front, a professor from Stanford leaned forward, watching her work with open awe. "She's not solving it," he whispered. "She's re-engineering it." Professor Mercer, sitting in the back as an observer, clenched his jaw. He had come to watch her fail. Instead, he was witnessing his carefully laid plan turn into a spotlight. And Maya, she didn't look up once, because she wasn't racing the clock. She was reclaiming it. The final question appeared. A complex, nonlinear differential equation tangled in nested Laplace transformations and disguised variable layers. One look sent a ripple of anxiety across the room. A student from Harvard put his head in his hands. Another from Princeton froze, pencil hovering midair. But Maya, she exhaled slowly, deeply. This wasn't intimidation, it was invitation. Her pen glided across the page, her mind cutting through chaos like a blade through mist. The strategy wasn't to go faster. It was to go deeper, to find the core where others only saw confusion. Behind her, one of the judges whispered, "She's not hesitating. She's accelerating." A Stanford professor leaned in. "She's already past the midpoint." No one else was even close. Maya didn't smile. She didn't blink. She was working not just from knowledge, but instinct, the kind that only grows in people who've had to outthink bias their whole lives. This wasn't just another test. It was a battlefield. And Maya had been fighting on one since the day she first picked up a pencil. The exam room fell silent as the final seconds ticked away. Some students stared blankly at unfinished pages. Others clung to shaky answers. Maya. She had finished 5 minutes earlier. She approached the judge's table and handed in her work without a word. As she reached the door, a voice called from behind Miss Thompson. It was one of the senior judges standing. The room paused, eyes turned. "We just reviewed your final problem." A hush fell. He cleared his throat, clearly shaken. "You didn't just answer it correctly. You solved it in a way we've never seen." Gasps, soft murmurs. A student from MIT leaned toward his peer. "Wait, what does that mean?" Maya didn't flinch. She only met the judge's eyes, her voice quiet but firm. "I saw a faster wrote." The judge looked down at her paper again, like rereading a revelation. In that moment, no one saw a hoodie. No one saw race. No one saw the girl who didn't belong. They saw the mind that just redefined how the problem could be solved. Inside a separate evaluation room, 6 judges sat in silence, Maya's exam laid out before them. The air was thick, not with debate, but disbelief. "Her proofs are flawless," one murmured. "Inefficient," another added, "no wasted motion." They looked at each other, scholars from Ivy League schools, Nobel nominees, men and women who had spent decades teaching the best minds in the world. And yet this sophomore from a mid-tier university had left them stunned. Then one judge asked, almost cautiously, "Do you think it was luck?" The Stanford professor replied, "It was vision." The lead evaluator leaned back in his chair. "She doesn't just solve. She sees what others haven't even thought to look for." Just then the door opened. Maya stepped in, composed, calm. A senior judge stood and spoke directly to her. "We'd like to offer you a position on our national research team. Your solution deserves more than a score. It deserves to shape the future." Maya blinked, then asked, "Is this an invitation or a correction?" The judge hesitated, then smiled slowly. "It's recognition. Overdue but earned." Back at Halton University, Maya's name echoed through halls where she once walked invisible. Students whispered her story. Professors referenced her methods. But nothing surprised her more than the man waiting outside her classroom door. Professor Mercer, he stood stiffly, arms crossed, gaze unreadable. "Congratulations," he said. His voice was quieter than usual, measured. Maya tilted her head. "Thank you." A long pause. "I was wrong," he finally said. She nodded. "I didn't need you to admit it. I needed you to stop perpetuating it." He flinched, not visibly but internally. Then slowly he gave a faint nod. No excuse, no defense, just the truth acknowledged, however late. That afternoon when Maya entered her next class, the room went silent. Not with tension, but but with a quiet respect. This time, they weren't waiting for her to fail. They were waiting to learn. That day, Maya was invited to guest teach the final 15 minutes of class. Not by request, by respect. She approached the board not with hesitation, but with calm authority. Her explanation of the optimized solution wasn't just brilliant, it was clear, human empowering. For the first time, even seniors took notes from a sophomore. As she finished, she turned back to the class. Her voice was steady. I didn't come here to prove I'm better than anyone. I came here to remind you that brilliance doesn't come in one shape, one skin tone, or one accent. It comes wherever it's allowed to speak. Silence. Then applause, slow at first, then rising. In the back, Professor Mercer wrote something in his leather notebook. Just one line: the system didn't fall apart. It adapted when someone refused to back down. When Maya left the classroom that day, she didn't walk out a student. She walked out a precedent. News of Maya spread like wildfire across academic forums. Social media lit up with clips of her solving the national exam problems, her eyes calm, her hands steady, and her voice unwavering. Genius has no template. A major national education network reached out to Halton's math department requesting an interview. Dr. Rivera asked gently, "Do you want to be on camera?" Maya hesitated, then nodded. Not for attention, for every student like her, still invisible somewhere thinking they didn't belong. The filming took place in the same lecture hall where it all began. The lights, cameras, and cords couldn't dim her presence. She looked into the lens, voice low but sharp. When I walked into this room on my first day, everyone expected me to fail. They weren't wrong because I wasn't smart. They were wrong because they didn't ask who I was before deciding what I couldn't be. She paused, then added, "Today I'm not here because they changed. I'm here because I didn't break." Behind the camera, one crew member wiped a tear. This wasn't just a story, it was a reckoning. That night, Maya returned to the old library room where she had spent so many evenings alone, overlooked, overworked. She sat quietly at her usual spot, notebook, open a lamp casting soft light over the pages. No applause, no attention, just her and the silence. But this time the silence wasn't cold. It wasn't crushing. It was peace. She flipped to the first page of her notebook. At the very top, scrawled in fading ink, "Silence can kill a dream, but it can also feed a fire." She smiled, because now the fire wasn't hiding. It was roaring. She thought about all the classmates who once avoided her, now nodding, seeking her thoughts, learning from her without irony. She thought about a younger version of herself, the girl who stayed late, not to get ahead, but just to keep up with expectations stacked unfairly high. And she thought about the future, about a world where brilliance didn't have to claw its way into view. In that quiet, she felt something she hadn't felt in years: belonging. 1 week later, Halton University invited Maya to deliver the keynote speech for incoming students, a tradition typically reserved for faculty or award-winning alumni. She walked onto the stage in a simple white shirt and black slacks. No jewelry, no title, no armor, just truth. She looked out at the sea of students and faculty, then began. "Some of you were welcomed here with open arms. I wasn't." Her voice didn't shake. "But that doesn't mean I didn't belong." Murmurs stopped. "I didn't come here to tell you a fairy tale. I came here to tell you that this system doesn't break easily. But sometimes it cracks when someone refuses to fit the mold." She paused, and when it cracks, light gets in. A hush swept over the auditorium, then applause, then a standing ovation. In that moment, Maya didn't just inspire, she rewrote the rules. After her speech, the invites poured in. Ivy League research offers guest lectures, national press. But the message that meant the most didn't come through email. It came in a wrinkled envelope, handwritten from Georgia. "Dear Maya, I'm Ava, a 10th grader. I used to think math wasn't for girls like me, but when I saw your speech, I cried. Not because I was sad, but because I saw myself for the first time. I'm applying to a math summer camp next week. Thank you. Thank you for showing me we belong." Maya folded the letter slowly, pressing her hand over her heart. Not every battle was about beating the system. Sometimes victory looked like a girl daring to raise her hand for the first time. Sometimes the loudest legacy came from the quietest ripple. Years later, Halton University established a new scholarship, the Maya Thompson Fellowship, awarded to students who defy expectations, think independently, and rise despite being told not to. Her name now appeared in textbooks not as folklore but as curriculum. Professor Mercer had long since retired. In his farewell interview, a reporter asked, "What was your most important moment as an educator?" He answered without hesitation, "When one of my students taught me the system wasn't broken, it was incomplete." And Maya, she continued teaching, researching, and returning to Halton every fall, not for praise, but to sit quietly at the back of the lecture hall and watch new voices rise, because she no longer needed a microphone. She had become the echo others now followed. And from that day on, when a new student walked into a room and felt the weight of judgment pressing on them, there was a name they remembered, not as a symbol, but as proof. Brilliance has no color, no accent, no single shape. For every Maya out there silenced, overlooked, underestimated, your power isn't in proving them wrong. It's in refusing to believe them in the first place. The system may not be built for you, but you are not here to fit in. You are here to redefine it. Speak boldly, walk proudly, and let your truth echo where silence once lived.